Next, we're going to have Bob Gantt, who is our CTE Regional Coordinator, and he's a regional coordinator in our North Central region. I see Bob. Bob, are you ready? I see his video is coming up. And Bob is going to talk with us about Perkins and CTSO funding as it relates to Perkins, where we get most of our CTE monies. Bob, happy Monday and happy first day of Friday.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hope everyone's doing well. That was a great presentation from Robert. I enjoyed that, and it brought back memories. So just to tell you a little bit about myself. Let me see, I got the wrong one. Hang on a second, guys. Man. Okay, let's see if I can get it. There we go. Up. I'll get going here. So just a little bit about me. I've been around for a while. I was a marketing teacher and later became what was then called a VOCATS coordinator, and then a CTE director in a larger LEA, and now I'm a regional coordinator, and love the work that I do because I get to help directors and CIMCs and CDCs and teachers as they try to implement high quality programs in their LEA. And I will tell you that you can't, in my opinion, you can't have a high quality CTE program without a CTSO. It's that important. It really is. As a teacher, it was a great, you heard from Robert, and he is spot on. It's a great motivator. And you know, it motivated kids that had high academic abilities. It motivated kids that had, that weren't as academically inclined as some of the others. And so I strongly encourage you to get into that. So I'm going to talk, though, about how you pay for all this, because it doesn't happen that you just walk in and unfortunately there's just not a ton of money lying around, as you'll find in education. Probably already knew that. So we've got to figure out how to pay for some of these experiences, especially when we're talking about taking kids on some of these wonderful, wonderful trips. And you know, for some students, it might be the first time they've ever stayed in a hotel. It might be the first time they've ever taken an airplane flight. So my presentation today is fairly short, and it's on basically what are we going to do to pay for these things. We realize they're valuable, but how do we pay for them? So please feel free to ask questions. Glad to help in any way that I can. So the first question you're probably asking yourself is, okay, flights, hotel, wow. How am I going to pay for this? So can your PSU or your LEA, your school system, provide support for your CTSO? And the answer is, thankfully, see if I can get it to do right, yes, but only if your organization meets the following criteria. And you heard Robert talk about the difference between a club and a CTSO, and that's going to sort of come into play here. So this is written into the fiscal and policy guide that we give to your directors. It says, here's what you need to be able to do in order to fund a CTSO. First of all, I want you to look at that first bullet there. It has to serve as an integral part of CTE instruction. And then there's some more to that, but I kind of cut some of that out. And the other thing that's in that definition is it has to contribute to the attainment of recognized competencies in the curriculum. So again, going back to what Robert shared with you, your CTSO is simply an extension of your classroom. You're actually bringing that classroom alive. And so in order to be able to pay for these, the organization has to do that. It has to be supervised by qualified and licensed CTE personnel. So that's going to be you. Each one of you will have an opportunity to engage your students with a CTSO that's aligned to your program area. Has to be affiliated with appropriate state and national organizational structures. So basically, you know, if you just go off and do something locally, then we can't use CTE funds to help support your program. It has to be organized and structured in accordance with CTE guidance and policies of the North Carolina State Board of Education as specified by CTE. And finally, it has to serve as a teaching strategy. And I want you to look at that significantly contributes to the motivation and total development of students. And we talk about some things there at the end: leadership abilities, citizenship skills, social competencies that lead to a wholesome attitude about living and working. So those are the requirements for us to be able to provide that support that you need to engage in those activities. And you know what? If you follow your CTSO's program of work, you're going to do these things. That's the really cool thing about it. All right. So the second question, will your PSU provide support for your CTSO? And that's another whole question. So as you know, you have a CTE director, and that person is charged with fiscal responsibility of the funds that come to your LEA. And so they have decisions to make, and they're not always easy. So the answer is, and I love to throw this out, maybe. CTE directors do recognize the value of CTSOs as part of a high-quality CTE program. It's written into what we give them, and it's a strategy that many want to incorporate. The problem is, first of all, your LEA gets a certain amount of funding, and that funding can be limited at times. It seems like there's a lot more good things going on that need funding than the funding that we receive. So that, that decision to fund your CTSO may be impacted by the amount of funding that you get, and then also with that limited funding, the competing needs that exist for that money. So just to give you a direction, now I had a very large LEA, but I spent between $60,000 to $80,000 a year in CTSO support. And the amazing thing about that was, since I was located in the city where we held most of the state conferences, I didn't even have to pay for hotels and things like that to support my CTSOs. My travel bill was not huge like a lot of yours would be if you're coming from the east or the west. But I used to spend $60,000 to $80,000. Now, I had a very large LEA. That's larger, just so you know, than a lot of whole budgets that some LEAs or school systems will get, right? So think about what you could do with $60,000 to $80,000. You could put in 2 or 3, at least 4 computer labs. You could do a lot of things with that money. Why did I devote that much money to CTSOs? Because I understood as a teacher, from my experiences as a teacher, I understood the value of those CTSOs, and you heard the stories that Robert shared with you this morning. You have state and federal guidelines on fiscal policy and what you can support. And we're going to go over some of those in just a minute, so you have at least a broad understanding of those things. And finally, there may also be local policy that comes into play as to how you can spend your money. And so all those factors impact what your PSU or your LEA or your school system, all those enter into the director's decision to sort of support you in your CTSO activities. So, what support can your school system provide for your CTSO? Well, first of all, we can pay for now, this year, CTSO affiliate memberships. And let me explain what that means. An affiliate membership is kind of like a buffet. You pay a certain price, and that covers membership for all students, the advisor as well, usually. All those are covered under that affiliate membership. Some CTSOs offer affiliate memberships, others don't. But if your CTSO offers an affiliate membership, this year at least, we can pay for affiliate memberships. And I think we're going to review that and look at continuing that in the future. So CTSO affiliate memberships. We can pay for CTSO items that are required for competition. So we can purchase items that are aligned to your curriculum. You could make the case that these items could be purchased to support your curriculum, even if you weren't even if they weren't part of your CTSO. So we can pay for those. We can pay for student preparation and participation in technical skill competition aligned with your curriculum. So basically, if you need a tool or an item that would go towards that competition, you can use funds, CTE funds, state and federal, to help pay for those items. So let's bring this up early, and we'll talk about this often. CTSO jackets. So many CTSOs require students to wear CTSO specific jackets. In my case, I taught marketing and business, so I was a DECA advisor. So we had the blue DECA blazer with the wonderful DECA emblem emblazoned on the chest. And our students, when we got to national competition, they were required to wear those in competitive events. And so it was always a scramble to try to get those. We would work with other advisors. We would exchange. We'd say, hey, we got a size 40. You got a size 38. Can we swap for this event? And we'll get it back to you. And so it really was a partnership within the state. We were working with everybody at national to try to make sure all students had access to a jacket. So that's always a challenge. Believe it or not, that's a challenge because you got to get the right size. If you're going to purchase jackets, we recommend local funds. Those are funds that are provided by either your school district, or in some cases, funds that you may earn through fundraising activities for your CTSO. They can be purchased with state funds. And I know this isn't going to really, you're just thinking, okay, I just need the funds. They can be purchased with state funds, but only if they remain property of the school system. And it does require a system to maintain control. So if you go to your CTE director and you say, you know what, I need a couple of jackets for national competition. Can you get them for me? Here are the sizes I need. That's fine. They may be able to do that if they've got some money, but they've got to remain property of your school system or your school. They can't be given to the students after the competition as their personal property. That's a no-no. We'll look at that in a minute as well. How about attending competition? Well, you'll have regional under normal, whatever the normal year is. You'll have state and could have national if you have winners that qualify. So what can we pay for? Well, the first thing is we can pay for substitute teachers. So when you're out of your classroom, you've got to have a substitute. So your LEA can pay for a substitute teacher. They can pay for staff travel, subsistence, and that includes your hotels, your meals. They can also pay your registration fees for the conference. So your particular attendance to that conference can be paid for. Now, this was a problem for me. When we had state conference, my LEA was within the 35-mile limit of the conference site. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't pay for hotel or meals for my advisors. I couldn't do it. They wouldn't let me. I tried, but they would not let me. So just some things to think about. There are always things that come into play that may impact that funding. How about for your students? Well, we can pay for travel. So we can pay for airline. We can pay for a bus. I even had some that took a train one year. We can pay for hotel for those students, and we can also pay for registration fees. We can't pay for meals, though, and that comes up a lot. We get a lot of discussion around, well, I've got some students who are economically disadvantaged, and, this is a heavy lift for them to go out of town. What support can be provided for them to eat? And unfortunately, again, from state or federal funds, which is what we're talking about, student meals can't be paid from those funds. So you got to get a little creative there if you want to help those folks out, those students out. Now remember, I've got this on several slides. Local policy may be more restrictive. I'm telling you what you can do based on fiscal policy. These are allowable expenses. They're not required. Your director is not required to pay these things for you. So again, it's going to be sort of a partnership. You're going to have to work with your director to figure out what they can pay for you and what they can't. Some continued support. How about state and national officers? Gosh, if you're lucky enough and fortunate enough and, work with your students and you've got somebody who's got that interest and that ability, they may become a state or a national officer. So we've tried to clearly define what we can and can't do. For state and national offices, again, if you've got a student that has to go and you've got to go with them, we can pay for your substitute teacher. We can pay for your travel. We can pay for your subsistence. We can pay for your registration fee for the conference. We can also pay for the student's travel, hotel, and registration fee. Again, meals are not supported by state funds, but I want you to look at that little disclaimer at the bottom. These can only be provided if the state or national CTSO organization is not providing that support already. And it's not a kind of case where the CTSO can say, oh, well, now you can use state or national funding, so we're not going to provide it anymore, so you can provide it. You got to have a gap year there and some other things. So just wanted to make you aware of that. We try to work with the CTSOs and the CTSO advisors, state advisors, to make sure we're trying to cover that for your students. Did I skip one? Hang on one second. Oh, yeah, I skipped one. Whew. Got to go back and cover this one. So what can we not pay for? And some of these you've already heard. We cannot pay for student meals. This is expressly prohibited from our legislation. So again, you're going to have to work if you want to try to support some of those students who are who are economically disadvantaged. There are some ways around that, and we'll talk about that in a second, but we can't pay for it out of state funding. Your director cannot do that. We can't pay for individual membership fees. That's expressly forbidden, again, in federal legislation, so we can't do that as well. We can pay for those affiliates, remember, but not for individual membership fees. We can't pay for CTSO items that are not directly tied to your curriculum. So we can't pay for novelty. We can't pay for a CTE a DECA folio or an FFA t-shirt, something like that. That's expressly forbidden. We can't pay for those personal items that you see as the next bullet. We can't pay for those items that are not tied directly to the curriculum. Again, CTSO items including jackets that become personal property of the student, we can't pay for those. We also can't pay for students to attend conferences who are not participating in competitive events at the state or national conference. So, I always had some students who would come in, they'd be sophomores, they might be freshmen, they'd go to state conference, they get really excited, and they go, I want to go to national conference, but they didn't qualify. They didn't, in their event, they were not winners. They wouldn't qualify to compete at the national level. So if they're not competing in competitive events, then you can't use your funding to pay for those specific or their attendance at a national conference. Even though it might be a great motivator, you just can't do it. Okay? All right. So what can you do to help fund some of your CTSO activities? First of all, you better be prepared to conduct some fundraising activities to support your CTSO. Get ready to do some fundraising. Guys, you're going to have to do it most likely. I've sold everything from donuts. Krispy Kremes did extremely well, but they are damaging to the waistline, but they're great. They were great fundraisers. I've sold popcorn. I've sold candy. We've sold all kinds of things. One of the things that I really loved that was a neat fundraiser, we worked with, we were fortunate enough when I taught, I was in Durham. So we would work with Duke or UNC, and we would go over and we would man one of the concession stands at a football or basketball game. And that was nice because you made a pretty good amount of money, especially if they were having a good year. You would make a nice amount of money. It was done in a day, and you didn't have to worry about, chasing people down to try to find out what happened to that box of candy that they left in their car when it was 90 degrees and it melted into one big blob, and they really couldn't sell it after that. So that's kind of a neat fundraiser. But get creative and look out there at what exists in your community. There may be opportunities, but be ready to do that. Have a discussion early with your CTE leadership. That includes your principal, and beyond your CTE leadership, but that includes your director if possible. Talk about what the funding policies are in your school system. What does your district fund? What do they generally not fund? What are the policies? Remember, I said policies may be more restrictive. Explore the options that exist for your school, your district. I talked about fundraising. Some schools limit the type and the number of fundraising activities. So you may only be able to have one fundraising activity. You may have none. They may not allow you to sell candy or donuts or some of those kinds of things in your school district. So again, that may be a discussion with an appropriate assistant principal or principal. And consider all your available resources. One year we were a little short trying to get some students to national competition. We'd had a really good year. We had a lot of students. So, we started talking to some parents, and guess what? One of my students who was going to national conference, his mother was a fundraiser who worked in the community. And so she had some great ideas on how we could approach businesses and possibly enlist some support from businesses and how we could generate some revenue. And so we tapped her expertise, and we were able to raise the funds necessary to send students to that national event. So always consider your parents, always consider your local businesses. Take a look at everything that's available in your community and see what works out for you. So that sort of funding CTSOs, it's always a challenge, always lots of questions around it. But guys, it is worth the effort. I'm going to tell you, I've done it, did it while I was a teacher, and loved, really loved doing it. It was a great part of the program, and I encourage you to undertake that. And you know, if your director can do anything to help, I know they will. So that being said, what did I do? There we go. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to say, are there any questions that I can answer? Man, we're quiet this morning. No questions?
Yeah, on the concession stands, how much did you actually, what was the range of funds you can get from something like that?
That's a great question. So, and you got to remember, this was probably 20 something years ago, so my memory may be fuzzy. We did it, most of the time we did it at UNC. That was Mac Brown's early days at UNC. They were not particularly good days at UNC. Now, he turned it around, but they were not particularly strong days. So I think we could earn anywhere from $500 to $1,000 for a day. So that wasn't bad, as I recall. And that was 1990 something pricing too. So remember that as well. But you can check. There was at that time, Coke Classic had the management of that. And you know, your local school may allow your group to come in. It'd be great if you're marketing or business, or even some of those. If you're family consumer science, be a great way to go in and run the concession stand at the local football game. Maybe you get a small cut. You're probably not likely to make as much money as we did at a college game, but still, you know, it's hassle free, and you don't have to worry about chasing down people and wondering where that missing box of candy is. So, good question.
Bob, there's
Yep.
a question. There's a question in the chat. How do you access these funds?
How do you access these funds? Again, there'll be different processes probably in every school system. Some directors may be more accessible than others. The school system where I was a director, I had 300 staff members, teachers and CDCs and SBCs, 300 something, 320 something. So it was a little more difficult, but fortunately I had 2 or 3 program support people, and so generally they would talk to those folks. We tried to publish too guidelines because we were so large and there wasn't that personal interaction as much. We tried to publish guidelines and policies that said, here's what we will provide. So teachers knew up front that, you know, this is what they're going to cover. First place winners going to national competition, and these were the items that we would cover, and here's what we can't cover. And then, guys, if we could do more, we would do more sometimes. We would step outside those guidelines and try to provide more if the budget allowed. And sometimes we were very fortunate and able to do that. Good question. But have that discussion with your, talk to your fellow teachers, talk to your fellow advisors, as Robert suggested, within your LEA. If you're a marketing teacher and you're the lone teacher at your school, maybe there's another marketing teacher in the county, right? But if not, talk to your mentors, talk to your fellow teachers, and find out what is the policy and how do we have that discussion with our director. But your CTE director is the one that's going to ultimately make that decision about funding. Good question.
Bobby, if I could chime in just for a second. It's Pam O'Brien in CDECA. One resource I was thinking about, I was kind of going down memory road with you a little bit, thinking about when we were in the Durham district. And one group that we had was the sales and marketing executives. And if you are in an area where they have a strong chapter, they are huge proponents of marketing, or really any skill set that provides for public speaking and that sort of thing. And they used to be really, really good when we were in Durham at giving our kids lots of money towards, particularly nationals is when they usually would come through with us. But there are chapters in Raleigh, there are chapters in Charlotte. I'm sure there are some in Greensboro. I'm not familiar with them. But any civic related organizations in your communities, be it Lions or whatever group there is in your community, there may be opportunities with them, like to do a breakfast or to do a pancake breakfast if they have a hall or an association. But SME was a group that was particularly good to us back in our day. So don't forget about your local community access that you have to people out there.
And it's amazing. Thank you, Pam. That's a very good point, and that's what I mean. Consider all your resources. And you know, guys, it's amazing. And Pam, you can help bear this out for me. Sometimes I'd go out in the community, I'd say I teach marketing, and they go, "Oh, they got that in schools now." And I say, "Yes, they do." And then I'd say DECA, and they'd say, "Oh, you're the DECA teacher?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the DECA teacher. That's what I am." So sometimes you'll be known as the HOSA teacher or the DECA teacher or the FFA teacher. You know, they recognize those names. They have meaning, and they have forgive the pun, but they have marketing, you know, they carry marketing weight for you as you move out in the community. So that's a great follow Pam's advice. Get out there and connect with your civic organizations. That's good stuff. Any other questions or any other thoughts?
Well, Bob, I'm just going to share as we wrap up that there are also some other suggestions in comments in the chat box, and one is spirit nights at fast food restaurants. And then someone else is saying that they wear their HOSA t-shirt to all appointments just to speak up, just to spark up a conversation. So again, as Bob has said, consider all of your resources. Pam gave you some ideas, and there's some ideas in the chat, and you can keep those going. But we do want to transition, and I want to thank Bob for his presentation. Just again, as he said, and Pam says, know your resources and use those resources. So you've had that conversation, you now know now about your funding, and make your CTE director your good friend too, because they have money, and your parents. So that's right, network, network, network. So thank you again, Bob, and thank you for adding some comments, Pam. We want to go ahead and transition to our next presenters, and they're going to be Ashley Wagner, who is our CTE State Consultant for Business, Finance, and Marketing, BFM, as well as she's going to have Tessa Brown, who is a teacher at Brevard High School in Transylvania County, and she's a DECA advisor, and she's a marketing teacher, so I'm sure she might have some ideas as well. So now I want to transition over to Ashley Wagner. My tongue is tied this morning. Thank you. There you are, Ashley.
Thank you, Felicia. Good morning, everyone. As Felicia said, I'm Ashley Wagner. I'm one of your BFM consultants. And this morning, the presentation I'm going to share with you is some how-tos of incorporating your CTSOs into your classroom. So you're going to hear a lot of sentiments echoed from what Rob shared and from what Bob shared. And I think hopefully it'll start to kind of click with you that this is not something brand new. This is not something extra or a whole new thing you're having to add to your plate. It's already there. We're just going to sort of help you uncover it and figure it out and make some of those connections. So just to give you some background on my CTSO experience, I was a marketing teacher. I started my teaching career in Brunswick County, and when I sat down for my job interview, the principal looked at me and said, well, part of your job is DECA. Are you okay with that? And I just needed a job, so it was, yes, sir. I didn't know really what DECA was. I had some experience with FBLA, but not a lot. But he made it very clear that it was an expectation that DECA was part of the job, that it was not something extra. So I took it on. I was lucky to have some more experienced teachers on my team, so I wasn't going it alone, which is super important to learn from people who have been doing it for a while. But DECA quickly became probably my favorite part of my teaching job. It made the hard days and the long days worth it, DECA was definitely a highlight for me, and kept me going, because I think it also kept the kids going. So once you get involved with it and get going, I hope that you'll have that same experience.